Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to day 3, the concluding day of PRovoke's 2020 Global Summit. The finish line is in sight. We have 3 action-packed sessions for you today. Thank you to everyone joining us. Thank you to everyone rejoining us, perhaps, after participating in the first 3 days of the event on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We had 3 conference days. We also had the Global Sabre Awards this morning, I think. I don't know, I'm very confused now by all the time zones. As always, I need to thank our partners for helping us deliver a remarkable array of content over the past 4 days. You can see them all on the screen in front of you. Thank you to them all. The PRovoke Global team is up to date with its session recaps. So well done, team. That, I guess, is one of the benefits of doing this event virtually. But that also means you can read about some of the fascinating discussions we've had, whether that's Pfizer's Sally Sussman on the state of corporate affairs, or Wesley Lowery on how the media deals with racial injustice, just 2 of the 20+ sessions that have examined this year's turbulence and transformation from a public relations perspective. We will also have videos of each session up in the coming days, so look out for those, especially because you can watch the unabridged discussion on fighting the infodemic with the World Health Organization. That's a fascinating exploration that really does deserve your time. Please do contribute questions via the chat function next to the screen. Converse on social media via the PRovoke Global hashtag. And with that said, we're going to move into our first session. Let me just, before I do that, let me just tell you that the final session today will be looking at media activation strategies. We also have a deep dive into a very successful campaign from India with Dettol's Chief Marketing Officer. But first of all, I am very happy to welcome to PRovoke Global one of India's top media editors. Shekhar Gupta is founder and editor-in-chief of The Print, a digital startup that is building a new editorial space in one of the world's top media markets. Shekhar is not only a prolific columnist, a recipient of the Padma Bhushan, he is, of course, the former editor-in-chief of the Indian Express, where he spent 19 years as editor-in-chief. He was also the company's chief executive. In his 4-decade career in journalism, he's reported on many key Indian and international events, including Operation Blue Star, Tiananmen Square, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the First Gulf War, and many more. Shekhar, welcome to our conference. How are you doing?
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be on this, even if in this format, but happy to be with all of you smart guys who usually spend their time telling people what to do or how to.
Well, you can tell them what to do.
Out of problems.
Well, you can tell them what to do this time. And yes, it's a shame we're doing it virtually, but I guess it's better than nothing. So let's get going. This has been an event. This is a global event. But it's been an event, I feel, that has been quite tilted towards Western sensibilities and a Western audience until this session, I feel. And recently you said that the New World Order is weighted more towards China. So I wanted to start by asking you, are we living in a China-centric world now, and what does that mean?
Well, it's a China-centric world, but not all for good reasons. A China-centric world, I think, the world by and large was prepared for, because you knew where China was going, you knew it was a rising power, you know America was a stalling power. But everybody, until 3 years back, everybody, even in the region, that is Australians, the Japanese, people who are now part of the Quad, they all talked about a peaceful rise of China. And the Chinese also talked about a peaceful rise of China. It's only over the past 3 years that the Chinese have changed that equation. So rise of China, everybody was prepared for. China has been rising for some time. But that rise of China will mean what it does right now for the rest of the world, and particularly for its neighbors, is a very rude surprise.
You say it was a rude surprise. Was it really a rude surprise for all of you in India?
Well, rude surprise to the sense that rude surprise at the crudity with which it's been done. So it's something to give you trouble at the UN it's something to give maybe trouble in trade, maybe a couple of statements here and there, but to actually mass your forces and to mass your heavy stuff, mass your hundreds of tanks and artillery and fighter planes, that is unprecedented. That did not even happen in 1962 when the two countries fought a war. So this is something very different. This is, I think, a bully act of an order that nobody had expected. And we see what the Chinese are doing in South China Sea, with Taiwan, but most of that looks like talk. This is real stuff. This is real stuff. And it's the first time in almost 50 years that some that some violence took place. And for the first time in almost 50 years that shots were fired. So this is, the Chinese know the risks involved in what they are doing. And what's a rude surprise is that they think these risks are worth their while. So what are they after is something that at least we in India don't understand very well. And I'm not sure the rest of the world also understands what do the Chinese want. Does Xi Jinping think that today he has the power to redraw the maps of the world? Now, since the Second World War, we have seen that it's almost impossible to redraw maps of the world with blood, that too for a foreign power. If that was possible, Middle East would have been sort of cut and diced into the most perfect, peaceful place on the earth. It doesn't work like that. So nobody quite knows what this is. And that's what the uncertainty of where the Chinese are coming from is what makes the surprise even ruder.
So you talk about it from a military and geopolitical perspective. What does it mean, if anything, for the world of business? Because we have come to accept this kind of multinational model of engagement on the part of corporations, many of them American-based MNCs, but increasingly now Indian-based MNCs and MNCs from China. What does it mean for companies when we're seeing, this kind of almost a Cold War between the US and China, and also, we see tensions between India and China as well?
Well, I mean, I don't quite know what the specific question is, but let me try and guess. You want to rephrase it? Because I'm
okay. Let me put it this way. We've seen Chinese apps banned in India.
Yeah.
Right. We've seen Chinese companies restricted in America and elsewhere. We've seen American brands being called on to take sides sometimes in terms of where they stand when it comes to some of China's actions. So how do you see these geopolitical trends affecting businesses that are trying to operate across borders? Can business stay neutral?
Yeah, if you thought that I was talking more about the military stuff or strategic stuff, that's because we are next door neighbors. And the problem that India has there is clear and present. It's there. There are 60, 70,000 Chinese troops sitting there in an environment where the lowest altitude would be 14,500 feet, I suspect. And the temperature drops to -20 already at night now. And the winter is not yet begun. So that's a real thing. And that's the reason you might think that maybe it weighs too heavily on our minds. But the fact is that it's not just India and America. People blame Donald Trump for having given globalization a bad name because he walked out of TPP, he did other funny things. He talked tariffs, he arm-twisted his partners. But I think the death blow to globalization is being struck by the Chinese. Because if the idea of globalization is to be completely dominated and controlled by one preeminent economic power, which is China. Now, are we judging China versus the US? First of all, the American threat was never that big of this kind of domination. Second, there was more in common between a lot of the rest of the world and America in terms of values, in terms of democracy, in terms of institutions, etc., etc. China comes with a completely different kind of politics. And in that mix now, you have a dictatorial one-man leadership, a president for life. In America, you don't like Trump, you have a chance in 4 years. And maybe 2 weeks from now, you will look at America differently, either any which way. But a country like China gives you no such scope. So that's why a lot of the countries around the world find this a lot more suffocating.
Hmm. And what's your advice, if you have any advice, when, for businesses that are trying to operate perhaps in this kind of landscape? They would rather, I think, stay neutral on political affairs. Is staying neutral still an option?
Well, I don't think which business can stay neutral when the larger national interest gets involved. And I don't see that company CEOs and shareholders should be like us editors, that is giving their views or talking about what needs to be done or taking risks for freedom of speech as we do all over. But their lives are governed much more by government policy. And I don't see in this situation any of these companies being able to go beyond what is seen as the larger national interest in their respective countries. And you see now that even some of the European countries now are moving in on 5G. And these are very liberal European countries which have invested a great deal in improving their ties with China. But now there is a concern that China comes and controls you digitally. China comes and controls your communications. China comes and controls your electricity systems. Now the trust is gone. So the big problem with China is the trust is gone.
Mm-hmm. So companies have to some extent at least, reflect their national interests.
Yeah.
And see,
they will have no choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I guess the flip side of that is perhaps, what about companies that maybe, let's say in India, for example, do you expect any companies to, we've seen in America companies be quite critical of the Trump administration, say for policies or even political reasons. Do you expect that in India from Indian companies who are maybe unhappy with the Modi administration?
Well, I think they whisper on the side. They'll never say anything in public. They'll whisper on the side. And this happens every year at the time of the budget. When you have these Indian tycoons on your budget shows on TV, and you ask them, how do you rate this budget on a scale of 10? They say 8, 9, 10. I mean, given half a chance, they'll say 12 out of 10. But the moment the camera goes off, they start bitching and they whisper and they say, Mardia, they finished us. What the hell are they doing? So corporate India is really, it does not have a spine. And they have excuses. They said, look, we can't work without the government. There are the agencies, there are the tax people, etc., etc. But I keep thinking that there is safety in numbers. So if more of them spoke out, or if they spoke out as an institution, it will work. But it doesn't happen. In fact, if you talk to any Indian tycoon now in public, on a public forum or in public, there are other people hearing. They'll say things like, oh, I really believe in Modi's slogan of Atmanirbhar India, that is self-reliant India. It is nonsense. This is taking you back to the license quota Raj of the 70s. One after the other, products are going under licensing now. Now, earlier they put tires, automotive tires, under a licensing regime. Now they put air conditioners under a licensing regime. So there is a march backwards to the old state-controlled trading regimes. But Indian tycoons, barring one odd, wouldn't dare to question it. In fact, they will celebrate it. But so you can go to a gathering and people come up to you and they say, can I ask you a question? You say, sure. Then say, can I ask you a question off the record? And I tell them, look, I am a journalist, so I'm never off the record. I'm always on the record. So ask me anything. And they say, no, I'm asking you off the record. So then I have to say, what you mean is that the fact that you are asking me this question is off the record. And they say, yes. And then, all right. Then the question is, why is the government messing up on the economy? So I hope that describes the state of Indian.
It does. Yeah. So maybe more spine is required, perhaps. How do you see, brand India, brand Modi faring today compared to 5 years ago?
Well, compared to 5 years ago, internationally, definitely it has suffered quite a bit of attrition. It's not down and out because he wins his elections fair and square. He wins his elections by larger and larger majorities. Now, the big difference between, say, a Trump and Modi is precisely this, that Trump, for whatever he does become unpopular. And today he is behind in the ratings. It may still surprise us, who knows, like it did last time. But the fact is that there is a sense that he is unpopular among a lot of people. Modi, on the other hand, in this entire lot of alpha males of the nationalist right who are now governing the world, he is unique in the sense that he just had a quarterly economic decline of 23%, right? IMF says this year India will decline by 10.5%. Now, this is a country which even at a low rate of growth was growing at about 5%. So when you decline at 10.5% effectively compared to the previous year, you've gone down 15.5%. And yet you don't find the kind of disaffection that will throw the government out. So that is very peculiar to Narendra Modi. And we've just seen opinion polls come out of one of our provinces, Bihar, our poorest large province, which is going to the polls now. And it tells you that there is anti-incumbency, but people are blaming their state's chief minister, whereas Modi's stock has gone up higher. So this is it's an unusual situation.
Yeah, it isn't unusual and not something that I think many of us have seen before.
But globally, I would say one, because a lot of his quote unquote friends are now going into the shade a little bit. Trump, for example, Abe has gone. We don't know what will happen with Netanyahu. So you can see that globally, these alpha males of the nationalist right have some challenges.
Okay. So you brought it up. The US elections are coming very soon. I could ask you who you think is going to win.
Well, I will not even tell you if you ask me who I think is going to win in India. I've survived all this while not predicting elections because, and in the US particularly, we have seen that the US system that we don't understand very well in other parts of the world is we have first past the post, but the US has winner takes all. Yeah. And it's state by state and electoral college. That's why Trump's victory last year was such a surprise and everybody got it wrong. But from whatever that's coming out, not just from liberal media, but opinion polls, and a lot of the conservatives are now complaining about Trump, not just Mitt Romney. It does tell you that it's going to be very uphill for him now. And also the negativity on Biden doesn't seem as much as there was on Clinton among Democratic voters, younger voters.
Yeah. How do you see the world's relationship changing with the US depending on the outcome?
Well, I think I don't see any of the friends of America will be unhappy to see Trump go. All the friends of America will be happy to see Trump go. The reverse is also true. All the rivals of America will be unhappy to see Trump go. Because for China, for Russia, Trump is wonderful. Because what he's done is he's broken up America's alliances. He's alienated America's friends. He's basically seeking protection money even from his NATO allies. And the more he offends them, the more he weakens American power. The more he weakens American power, the more space opens up for China, which is now a genuine power. And the more space opens up for Russia to punch above its weight. Because Russia is a unique power. I call it the Pakistan of Europe, to the extent that it has very limited economic strength. It has many other issues, but it has a very strong military, nuclear weapons, one-man government, and most importantly, the inclination to use the military, particularly in its neighboring states. So if Russia has to carry on like a nuisance state, a more powerful nuisance state, they want Trump back in America. So this is a strange situation where America's friends will be not unhappy to see Trump go, and America's adversaries will be happy if he got re-elected.
Mm. And how, from your perspective in India, how have you seen the USA brand change over the past 4 years?
Well, USA is still very popular in India. The fact is, Trump is very popular in India. It's strange because I see this research from Carnegie and others that shows that 72% Indians, people of Indian origin, voters in the US will vote for Biden. I suspect if there was a vote, Biden versus Trump in India, Trump might win.
Wow.
That's because at that level, people don't know so much. And people will then link Trump with Modi. Modi will not do it. The moment there is a change in America, from my friend Trump, he'll go to my friend Joe, as in Biden. But in India, somehow, American right has found support. Even George Bush Jr. So I remember a real life incident when then US ambassador to America came to have lunch with us in our newsroom. And we used to have this little session where eminent people could talk with our staff. And one of our young people asked him that, Excellency, what does it feel like representing a country whose president is the most hated in the world? So he said, when I last checked Gallup or Pew or something, in India his ratings were 67%. I think I'll take that. So, because, very often we see things in terms of Pakistan, in terms of China. So today, America under Trump is seems like it is really standing up to China. And nobody is going into the question of whether Biden would have also done the same thing or not. Also, Trump talks. He doesn't deliver, but he talks. So, but that's fortunately, Indians in India are not voting in US elections.
Yeah, indeed. So we're getting a few questions coming in, but I want to ask you a couple more before we take some from the floor. So you've been covering global affairs for many years. Do you feel we're entering a more nativist, isolationist era, or is this just something that's overstated?
Well, I think it's a cycle, but that also comes from maybe a little bit from wishful thinking, because I like globalization. I prefer that we do not go back to this hyper-nationalism and then strengthening national boundaries, etc., because people across the world are living better than before. This whole idea that you now see a lot in American debate as well, American liberal debate, that everything is messed up in the world. Let's go back. Let's go back to what? 30 years ago, there was a Cold War. 20 years ago, there was the Gulf War. Incomes have gone up all over the world. Life expectancy has gone up all over the world. Burden of disease has come down all over the world. So what do you want to go back to? And I find a lot of the younger people, in old days, it used to be the older people who would always fret that things were so much better in our times. Now it's the younger people, what I call as the post-Google generation. They somehow don't believe that there was a world before Google as well. And things were not much better. So I do think that this will come back. And I think there are such benefits from globalization that even a country like China has the biggest vested interest in a globalized system. Unless China can actually rule the whole world, that's not going to happen. So I think this will come back. This is a cycle, because that's how public opinion moves. Public opinion, people, when they are driven by opinion, don't act like homeopaths. They act like surgeons. So they don't give you the medicine in tiny, ineffectual doses. They strike it like this. I mean, I know surgeons don't do it, but they wield the scalpel.
Is it the kind of perceived backlash against globalization? Do you feel that maybe the case for globalization is not being made well enough?
Well, I think those who can make the case for globalization, they are on the defensive. because it's very strange, because a lot of the public intellectuals who make the case for globalization are actually today on the defensive because of Trump, because they would be seen as people of the right or people of the economic right. That's what conservatism was about for a long time. But now you have Donald Trump, whose economics in trade is very left, whose economics at home is God knows what, just cut taxes. So a lot of the support base of globalization right now is deeply embarrassed. They are also embarrassed by China, because China became such a power because of globalization. Because China figured better than any other country how to take advantage of this. And then China not only became crucial to everybody's supply chains, but in many cases, it shifted the entire supply chains to China, barring the softer stuff. Somebody wrote the software, somebody made the chips, etc., etc. So right now, I think the supporters of globalization are a little punch drunk. And even the forces that are rising, say in America, America has an influence over all democratic countries. The forces that are rising, in fact, that will be Biden's big challenge, because now they will expect him to bring in real socialism and go back to which my question always is the same, go back to what? So that's why I think globalization will come back. It might have a different name, or it might have the pretense of nuances.
Yeah. Good. Well, I hope so. Okay, we've got a question come in from an audience member. With global trade increasing in technology, for example, automation and robotics tools, how does this drive the dynamics of the new Cold War, especially when the world is concerned about China commingling economic and security interests?
Security interests. I think it's complicated. I don't have the competence to talk about half of this question, but I will tell you that for any country, if economic and security or any interests get meshed up, security comes first. Everything else comes later. And I think that's what the Chinese don't understand. Chinese think, see, we are not, I mean, I have nothing against tribal societies. Tribal societies are wonderful. But we invented modern law because we didn't like the system of blood money. The Chinese seem to think that blood money still works. That give me this part of your territory, I'll give you a little more money. Give me this, I'll give you this. Or give me this, I will not harm you in this way. In this world, people will not buy into it. And if you look at China's real allies today, who are China's allies? I mean, in my more cynical moments, I say, oh, look at China. It has 2 nuclear weapon powers as its not just allies, but its vassals. That is Pakistan and North Korea. But the reality is China's real allies today are Pakistan and North Korea, who are in fact protectorates of China, and maybe then Iran, and I don't know where Turkey is going. So, and in a way, Russia. People now in America also, Russia is a Chinese ally, but that's a very different kind of transactional relationship. So I think any country will put security ahead, and most people in most countries will be willing to pay a little bit more for goods and services if they think that the need is to cut off China in the larger national interest, where security comes first.
I mean, are you seeing a backlash against, Chinese phone brands, the top ranked, I think, in India, right? Oppo or Vivo. Are you seeing any backlash against them in India, despite the security concerns?
Some of it is stupid also, but there is backlash. Some of it is juvenile, in the sense that IPL, which is the world's, the cricket world's premier sporting league, it has routinely had a Chinese phone company as its main sponsor, which is a big ticket sponsorship. Yeah. But this year they had to drop the Chinese phone company, even though the Chinese phone company manufactures its phones in India. So increasingly, these Chinese phone companies are manufacturing all their phones in India. In fact, some of those now have hoardings outside their shops or signboards saying made in India, because they make their phones in India. The brand is from overseas. But there is, I think, Chinese, and that's what intrigues me, that did Xi Jinping realize that he is now undoing 6 decades of work by his predecessors to get Indians to stop disliking China? Because what has happened now will last another 60 years, unless there's a regime change in China, or unless there is such a, I don't know what will change it. One should not predict the future, but the loss of goodwill for China, and now this is becoming global. I mean, if Europeans are doing it, then Europeans are the most forgiving towards China so far. But even they are now reacting, so there is trouble.
We've got a couple of minutes left. I have one more question for you. It's completely off the topics we've discussed. I hope you don't mind.
Not at all.
But we're seeing a lot of media companies in many markets, not India necessarily, but around the world. We're seeing the media sector struggling to some extent. You've built a successful digital media operation over the last few years in a very tough media market. Any lessons or advice that you can offer from that experience?
Well, first of all, I think there is avoid the risk of overthinking, because I'm a non-digital native. I've been a journalist since much before Google, and I've seen things change. In my life as a reporter, I have even filed stories on a Morse machine in India, in parts of India, dot dash, to now. So you've seen things change. Now, nobody can game what will happen to a market or a product or a platform 20 years from now. Nobody can even game it 3 years from now, because some Bezos, somebody will do something that we can't anticipate. So in our business, in my business, which is news, what will never go out of fashion is news and what we can do. So the lesson I learned was, I never tried to learn about technology. I never tried to learn about anything, software, CMS, nothing. I said there are smart people who are doing it, and they become so rich because they make these things so simple that even idiots can use these. Otherwise, why would Microsoft be such a big empire? You focus on what you can do well, which is creating great editorial products. And then some Bezos will figure out, or somebody else will figure out on which platform will it go out. And then you will have special effects artists in your team who will do it. So I think what we did was, we went back to very old-fashioned journalism. And sometimes in my sort of more outrageous moments, I say that, listen, don't try to make the print more fun. Try and make it as dull and boring and old-fashioned as possible. I mean, I don't mean that. What I mean is that our basics are politics, government, policy, serious stuff. And everybody is vacating that space now, because everybody wants hits. Yeah. So that space has opened up. It's like, and also polarization. There is left on one side, right on the other side. They are all sitting in their bunkers. But the space in the middle is all opened up. So you don't sit in one of those bunkers. You walk in that space in the middle. It's more dangerous because it's a sniper's alley. You get caught sniping from both sides. So you don't have that security. But the fact is, there is space. So if you are in this business, learn that. If you're in any other business that relies on technology, don't try to learn technology. Might be too late in our lives for us to learn technology. Other people are doing it, and they are making it friendlier and friendlier for us.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's some great advice on which to close. Shekhar, thank you so much for your time, for a very insightful discussion, and for being so generous with your answers. Shekhar Gupta, thank you very much.